Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Jagir, and I'm an epic fantasy writer. My debut epic fantasy novel, Breaking, is out now, and you can order from my website, linked in the description. I encourage you to check out my other videos related to my own writing and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so to stay tuned for my book releases and other epic fantasy content. Again, there will be a link in the description to my website should you want further information about me and about my books. This is part 2 in my series covering the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you have not watched my intro video to Gilgamesh, I definitely suggest that you go back and do so. Now, let us get into Book 1 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Surpassing all kings, powerful and tall beyond all others, violent, splendid, a wild bull of a man, unvanquished leader, hero in the front lines, beloved by his soldiers. Who is like Gilgamesh? What other king has inspired such awe? While many modern fantasy tales are much more subtle when it comes to bringing out the hero of the story, the writer of Gilgamesh throws it into the reader's face. I think this is totally fine, and actually a good thing in this ancient fantasy tale. It reminds us that humans love stories with someone who is good to look to. Sure, there are novels and book series where there is no clear good person, but there is typically someone we cheer for, who we dub the hero of the story. And in many of the best stories told, both fantasy and otherwise, it is a good hero that we can look to for inspiration and hope for a happy ending. In this epic tale, Gilgamesh is that hero, at least in this early portion of the tale, that the writer wants us to look to. He is, as the first paragraph states, radiant, perfect. There are two things that I think are worth taking note of in the beginning of the first chapter. The first being that Gilgamesh has both divinity and humanity. It states that he is 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. Son of King, I'm going to botch the name, Lugobanda, who became a god, and of the goddess Ninsun. Well, I am not clear if he is actually supposed to be divine in this tale or if it is meant to be exaggerative. It reminds me of similar stories from the ancient world that contain heroes and heroines who are both divine and human. The other item in the intro is that of the Great Flood, speaking specifically about Utnapishtim, a man that Gilgamesh meets who has survived this Great Flood. Again, I have not looked up anything specifically on how this story relates to other ancient stories of a worldwide or Great Flood, but this specific piece reminds me of the similarities we find across the ancient world. For example, the stories in the Bible and elsewhere. The very next paragraph has a perplexing change. We see Gilgamesh, named Radiant and Perfect, ruling harshly over his people in the city of Uruk. He uses them, abuses them, and does whatever he wants with them. So much so that the people cry out to their god, their heavenly father, Anu, to save them from Gilgamesh. As wonderful as Gilgamesh sounded initially, it seems that even he has allowed his status and power to bring out the worst in him, which is a very human quality that we all can suffer from. Anu hears their cry and commands Aruru, the goddess mother of creation, to create a double of Gilgamesh. This double will match Gilgamesh in every single way to balance life in Uruk in order to sustain peace. Aruru thinks in her mind of the creation and out of clay forms Gilgamesh's double, named Enkidu. I found this section to be especially intriguing. Rather than a typical story where the people overthrow Gilgamesh or there's a battle with an opposing civilization, instead there is an equal creation opposite Gilgamesh to balance him perfectly. It's quite original in my mind and makes for a good foundation to some potential conflict I could possibly see coming down the road. Enkidu is created from the clay of the earth and formed in the wilderness, which reminded me of Adam in the Bible. I'm sure that there's other stories elsewhere being formed from the dust of the earth. Here, Enkidu lives like a wild man and is accepted by the creatures of the wilderness, running with them and living alongside them. They accept him as their own. So wild is he that he ends up disturbing a trapper's way of life by destroying the hunter's traps and eating his food. This man, who is not named the trapper, seeks his father's advice, which leads him to Uruk, directly to Gilgamesh to seek aid. Gilgamesh, of course, does not know this wild man, the wild man Enkidu, the created man meant to be his equal opposite. So Gilgamesh instructs the trapper to seek Shamat, a priestess at the temple Ishtar, who will be able to assist him with this wild man. Seductiveness is how Shamat tames Enkidu, the wild man. For 7 straight days, Enkidu sleeps with her, transforming him from his animalistic nature to becoming a human man, both in body and soul. After the 7 days of being seduced by Shamat, Enkidu returns to the creatures that he had previously been accepted by. Now, though, rather than being accepted as one of them, they look differently upon him in his transformation into a man, and they shun him. Now, Enkidu cannot even outrun them. His wildness has completely changed into manhood, humanity. I really enjoyed this part of Enkidu's story. By sleeping with Shamat, he has bonded his soul with her in some way and has completely transformed into something other than his former creature self. Even the animals recognize it. It goes beyond just animalistic mating, that there's something unique about human intimate relationships. The author writes, he knew that his mind had somehow grown larger. He knew things now that an animal can't know. It's something the author recognizes that Gilgamesh knows in the story, and that even the animals can instinctively sense. Something else I found was interesting about this part of the story is that we do not hear from the trapper again. He was a character brought into the story, used, and then forgotten. This character served a definite purpose in the story, and I assume that he was happy in the end with Enkidu leaving his land, but that is up to the reader's imagination of what happens to him. There's a time and a place where a side character should be fleshed out more, and one can argue that any side character could be made more prominent. While I do not think it was necessary for the trapper to return to the story, it's definitely something I would have liked to have seen some final interaction with him, some final farewell. The chapter ends with Shamat telling Enkidu of Uruk, of the temple, and of Gilgamesh. Shamat refers to Gilgamesh as the hero destined for both joy and grief. She tells Enkidu of Gilgamesh's oppression of the people. Enkidu responds initially with a feeling of deep longing for a true friend, and at the end of his agreement to return to Uruk, he tells Shamat to reference to Gilgamesh, "I will challenge him. I will shout to his face, I am the mightiest. I am the man who can make the world tremble. I am supreme." We see the challenge already in place for what Enkidu was created for, to be an exact opposite of Gilgamesh. I couldn't help but feel through the reading this portion that there is some semblance of Gilgamesh within Enkidu. It seems they share the same passion and ferocity. Something I did not expect was how the chapter ended, with Shamat telling Enkidu of a dream that Gilgamesh had. And then he had that dream interpreted by his goddess mother, Ninsun. Gilgamesh saw in his dream a shooting star that fell at his feet. It was a rock that was too heavy for him to lift, yet a few sentences later, he did lift it, and in the dream, he brought it to Ninsun's, and she told him that it was his double, his second self. Coming out of the dream, the real Ninsun tells Enkidu that the large rock stands for a dear friend and a mighty hero, that he would be loyal to Gilgamesh, a true friend and companion. Well, we will just have to wait and see if a true friendship does come out of this to pass. That completes Book 1 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the next episode, I'll be reviewing and giving my thoughts on Book 2. If you made it this far into the video, I encourage you to like this video and even drop a comment if you'd like to add to the discussion. Would definitely love that. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to stay up to date on all my videos, including announcements and discussions for my own epic fantasy books and series, like my debut, Breaking. You can also subscribe to my newsletter on my website, linked in the description, for monthly updates. On there, you can also submit a contact form if you want to talk to me directly. Would love that. Absolutely. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate you sticking around this long. I'm really excited for what the rest of the series has for us. But until next time, I will see you soon.